Syrian state television says the government has released 500 prisoners suspected of being involved with the country's uprising. It comes 2 days after UN and Arab League envoy Kofi Annan urged President Bashar al-Assad to free detainees. It was a condition of the six-point peace plan that has so far failed to end the violence in Syria. Activists are reporting shelling and attacks throughout the country. And there were strong words from the Syrian government from the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday. The U.S. Ambassador Susan Rice warned of more violence, more sanctions, and possibly more extreme consequences.
And this becomes a proxy conflict with arms flowing in from all sides. And members of this council and members of the international community are left with the option only of having to consider whether they're prepared to take actions outside of the Annan Plan and the authority of this council. That scenario, obviously, is the one we all have sought to avoid through support for the Annan Plan. The decision rests in the first instance with the Syrian government, whether it will fulfill its commitments, and if it does, then the opposition has an obligation to reciprocate. If it doesn't, this council has a responsibility to act, and act swiftly and surely.
Well, let's speak to Amar Wakaf. He is from the Syrian Social Club, an organization calling for regime reform in Syria. He joins us live from London. Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. First off, just your reaction to this strong diplomatic language that we're hearing from the United Nations, this diplomatic pressure on Syria. Do you see it as being unfair?
Well, the news we're getting yesterday and today from al-Houla suggests that the two families that were slain from close range were actually pro-government supporters, the family of Abdul Razzaq and the family of al-Sayyid, and actually part of the family of Sayyid who were slain belonged to the deputy speaker of the new parliament. And if this news is confirmed, and if this news is official, then the stages that are being taken, or the steps that are being taken by the international community of expelling Syrian diplomats, not only would have been based on uncredible evidence, contrary to what we have been told. The problem is that the governments who took those decisions prematurely will have the moral responsibility for further death, because those people who can get into a town and kill a lot of people and get away with it because everybody is accusing the Syrian government will do it again.
So
and
who
indeed,
do you think is responsible? Sorry to interrupt you. Who do you think is responsible for the Houla massacre? It's widely believed that, even though you mentioned that perhaps pro-government families were killed, this might be the case, even though it's not confirmed yet. It's widely believed, though, that the Shabiha, the movements that are pro-Assad, that are supported by the government, that have been armed by the government, were behind this killing. So even the Syrian ambassador to the United Nations has said that anyone responsible for this massacre should be held accountable. So how do you bring these Shabiha militias in? How do you control them?
Well, why do you think it's the Shabiha did it? I mean, we've heard claims over claims for the past year that the army are killing themselves, the Shabiha are killing pro-government supporters. Why can't everybody accept that there are groups that are funded and armed by the outside who happen to have no responsibility whatsoever for the lives of people? I mean, they can kill children, as we have seen. We have seen it time and time again, coinciding with every single time the UN has an action or has an envoy to Syria. We've seen it in the February the 4th Security Council meeting on Syria. We've seen it on the February the 21st, March the 21st meeting on Syria of the Security Council. Every time there is something that regards that the United Nations is going to do on Syria, suddenly we have this huge massacre. And when governments of the world act, in my opinion, irresponsibly and prematurely, to suggestions that the Syrian army has done all this massacre by shelling, and day after day we are discovering more news that it wasn't the Syrian army who did this, and it was actually, in fact, pro-government families who have been victim to this.
There is a lot of
these governments have
that the Syrian government forces are responsible for, Mr. Wakast. You can't deny that.
Yeah, but it's not about the massacre that is in question. The massacre that is in question, and we've seen, all of us have seen the pictures. It's about close-range wounds sustained from close range. Some people, some children, especially the children, they had their throats cut. And if the 13 people who were killed today in Deir ez-Zor, whose hands are tied, as we have seen, are actually government supporters, then I am definitely positive then those people who've taken the premature decision to expel the Syrian diplomats have some blood on their hands.
All right, let me ask you just one last question, perhaps. Your organization, the Syria Social Club, is calling for regime reform rather than regime change. We know that the U.S. is keen on applying the Yemen option to Syria, where Bashar al-Assad would step aside. Would you be in favor of this?
Well, who says that the Yemen model is working? I mean, we've just heard news that actually Al-Qaeda is still having suicide bombs and the army is still engaged. I think the problem here is that the international community is very much preoccupied with the personality of President Assad. They want him out no matter what. And I think that is playing against the interests of the Syrian people. We promote, in a sense, regime reform, as in we keep the status quo and we enforce throughout popular pressure, in a sense, the government, we pressurize the political elite to go on for certain reforms. But it's not about this personality going in and that personality going out and the situation staying the same or even getting worse, because that's exactly what we've seen in Libya and that's exactly what we're seeing in Yemen now. So it's not about the model of Yemen or the model of Libya, it's about the model of Syria. Syria has its own preconditions and own stipulations and all circumstances, and we need to tailor something different.
Now yourself, Mr. Wakas, you've denounced the al-Houla massacre and so on. I mean, we are at a critical stage in this crisis in Syria. What do you want? What do you think the international community should do?
I think the international community, or most of the international community, because when we speak about Russia and China and India and so on, we're speaking actually of half of the international community. And I think those parties have got it right. They need to engage with the Syrian government and equally engage with the opposition and try to mediate in between them, not take sides. I think the preoccupation of the West in general, who in a sense call themselves the international community, of deposing of President Assad and the meeting of interest with some regional powers like the Saudis, like the Qataris and like the Turks, has made the situation worse. And now we have factions who are being funded directly by those people, not according to the contradicting
Do you have evidence
and opposing
of that?
the Annan peace plan. Sorry?
Evidence of the factions being funded by these outside countries, like you say?
They're not digging dollars out of the ground, are they? And we know that they have, Metis anti-tank missiles, and they have even Stinger missiles, and we've seen the Lutfallah second vessel detained by the Lebanese government, and it contains all sorts of sophisticated weapons. And actually what we are seeing now...
But the Syrian regime is also getting
Syrians,
some help from Iran, isn't it?
Well, the Syrian regime, the Syrian government is getting equipped in terms of a conflict with NATO. They're getting Yakhont missiles, they're getting Yak 130 planes from the Russians. These are not supposed to be targeted at al-Houla or whatever, these are against NATO ships. But the point of the matter is that these weapons are getting to the rebels, and we are seeing a reinstating or a reacting of the Afghan issue in the 1980s. There is this perceived Russian-backed government that we need to bring down, and let's give all the jihadis over there and bring them from all over the Arab world and the Muslim world. Let's give them sophisticated Stinger missiles and anti-tank missiles. It's Operation Cyclone.
We're going to have to leave it there. I apologize. We've run out of time. Thank you so very much for talking to us. Ammar Wakas of the Syria Social Club, joining us live from London.